This week on the Global Intelligence Weekly Wrap-Up, Neil Bisson, retired CSIS intelligence officer and director of the Global Intelligence Knowledge Network, examines a series of stories that highlight how modern intelligence threats are becoming more diffuse, more digitally enabled, and increasingly difficult to detect. The episode begins with a coordinated warning from Western cybersecurity agencies, revealing how Chinese state-link hackers are now leveraging everyday internet-connected devices to conceal their operations, effectively turning civilian technology into a global surveillance and access network. We then turn to Israel, where 2 Air Force personnel have been charged with espionage on behalf of Iran, underscoring the persistent challenge of insider threats and the growing use of non-traditional recruitment methods by foreign intelligence services. From there, the focus shifts to Canada, where a recent arrest in Quebec City has brought renewed attention to the online extremist network known as 764, a decentralized group targeting vulnerable youth through manipulation, coercion, and exploitation in digital spaces. That discussion continues with a deeper look at what 764 represents, a new generation of extremist threats that blur the line between terrorism, criminal activity, and psychological control, operating almost entirely online and without traditional structure or leadership. We then examine a high-profile national security case involving a former RCMP officer accused of acting on behalf of the Chinese government, where an unexpected development in court raises important questions about how Canada investigates and prosecutes foreign interference. And finally, we look at signals coming from within Canada's intelligence community, as CSIS indicates it may be unable to reduce staffing due to sustained operational pressures, a clear reflection of the growing demand placed on national security agencies. Are you ready? Let's go!
Hello, welcome back to the Global Intelligence Weekly Wrap-Up. I'm your host Neil Bisson, a retired intelligence officer with the Canadian Security Intelligence Service and the director of the Global Intelligence Knowledge Network. Each week, I take the top intelligence stories from the news on espionage, foreign interference, national security, and terrorism to provide you the analysis, insights, and intelligence to understand how the shuttering world of intelligence affects your safety, your career, and your sovereignty. It's been another busy week, from the arrest of a Quebec man on terrorism charges for his online acts with the terrorist entity known as 764 to the Canadian Security Intelligence Service announcing that there will be no retirements due to operational constraints. There's a lot to discuss, so let's dive in. For our first segment this week, we start with a coordinated warning from Western cybersecurity agencies raising serious concerns about the evolution of Chinese state-linked cyber operations. According to Reuters, intelligence and security partners, including members of the Five Eyes Alliance, are warning that Chinese hackers are increasingly using compromised everyday devices to conceal their activities while targeting Western organizations. This advisory, led by the UK's National Cybersecurity Centre and supported by partners across the United States, Canada, Australia, and others, highlights a significant shift in tradecraft. Chinese-linked cyber actors are no longer relying solely on direct intrusions. Instead, they are leveraging networks of compromised devices, including home routers, smart devices, and other internet-connected systems, to act as intermediaries for their operations. This approach allows attackers to mask their origin, making attribution far more difficult and complicating defensive responses. These covert networks are being used to infiltrate systems, steal sensitive data, and maintain persistent access within targeted organizations. From an intelligence perspective, this reflects a deliberate move toward what could be described as proxy infrastructure and cyberspace, a method that mirrors how state actors use intermediaries and human intelligence in covert operations. This is not occurring in isolation. Chinese cyber operations have long been associated with advanced persistent threat activity, targeting government, defense, and private sector entities across the West. However, what is notable here is the scale of accessibility and the infrastructure being used. Rather than relying on specialized or bespoke systems, these operations are now exploiting widely available consumer devices, many of which are poorly secured, effectively turning civilian technology into global surveillance and access network. This evolution aligns closely with previous reporting on such groups such as Bolt Typhoon, which have been linked to long-term access operations targeting critical infrastructure. Officials warn that the tactic makes detection significantly more difficult, as the activity can blend into normal internet traffic and disappear quickly, limiting opportunities for disruption. From a national security standpoint, this represents more than just espionage. It is about pre-positioning, establishing access that could be leveraged in future crisis, intelligence collection, disruption, and even sabotage. It also raises a broader concern. The attack surface is no longer limited to hardened government or corporate systems. It now includes the global ecosystems of consumer technology. The key takeaway here is that Chinese cyber operations are becoming more distributed, more covert, and more difficult to attribute. By leveraging compromised everyday devices, these actors are effectively building a shadow network that can be used to access Western organizations while remaining hidden in plain sight. As I've said before, this is not just about stealing information today, it's about positioning for potential action tomorrow. We head to Israel for our next segment, where 2 Air Force personnel have been charged with espionage on behalf of Iran, in a case that underscores the growing concern around insider threats within military and security institutions. According to reporting from the Wall Street Journal, the individuals are accused of maintaining contact with Iranian operatives and carrying out tasks in exchange for payment. The 2 individuals, both serving in technical roles within the Israeli Air Force, were arrested following an investigation by Israeli Internal Security Services. Authorities allege that over a period of time, the suspects communicated with Iranian intelligence and conducted activities on their behalf, receiving financial compensation for their actions. While the full scope of the information that may have been accessed or passed has not publicly been disclosed, the fact that both individuals held positions within the Air Force raises immediate concerns about access to sensitive systems, operational procedures, and infrastructure-related information. From an intelligence perspective, this is a textbook example of insider recruitment. Iran, like other state actors, continues to prioritize individuals who may not necessarily be senior officials, but who possess the right combination of access and vulnerability. This case is part of a broader pattern that has been emerging over the past several years, where Iranian intelligence services have increasingly turned to remote and online recruitment methods to identify and cultivate sources inside adversary nations. Rather than relying solely on traditional espionage tradecraft, these efforts often begin with seemingly innocuous online contact, gradually escalating into tasking requests. Financial incentives remain one of the primary motivations, particularly for individuals who may not initially view their actions as espionage. Israel has reported a rise in similar cases, reflecting a sustained effort by Iranian intelligence services to penetrate military and security institutions through non-traditional means. This case is a reminder that modern espionage does not always involve highly trained operatives. In many cases, it involves individuals placed in positions of access that can be exploited over time. The charging of 2 Israeli Air Force personnel for alleged espionage on behalf of Iran reinforces a critical point. Insider threats remain one of the most persistent and difficult challenges in national security. As intelligence services continue to adapt their recruitment methods, the line between external threat and internal vulnerability becomes increasingly blurred. We head to Canada for our main segment this week, where a terrorism-related arrest in Quebec City is bringing renewed attention to one of the most disturbing emerging threats in Canada's national security landscape. According to reporting from the Canadian press, the RCMP have arrested a 26-year-old man accused of participating in the activities of online extremist network known as 764. The individual, identified as Jeffrey Roussel, is facing multiple terrorism-related charges, including participating in a terrorist group and facilitating terrorist activity. Investigators allege that he used the Telegram platform to distribute violent and disturbing content linked to the 764 network, with the intent of recruiting others, primarily teenagers, and police describe the group's methods as highly manipulative. Victims are reportedly targeted on mainstream platforms before being moved into private encrypted chats, where they are groomed and coerced into acts involving violence, self-harm, and exploitation. From an operational standpoint, this is not just recruitment, it's coercive control. The use of blackmail, psychological manipulation, and gradual escalation mirrors techniques seen in both organized crime and intelligence recruitment. Authorities emphasize that 764 is not a terrorist organization in the traditional sense. It operates as a decentralized online network with no clear hierarchy, making detection and disruption significantly more difficult. The RCMP note that investigations into this type of activity often begin with tips from parents, educators, and cyber specialists, highlighting how deeply embedded this threat is within everyday digital environments. What stands out here is the targeting of youth. These networks deliberately seek individuals who are vulnerable, socially isolated, and struggling. They then exploit these vulnerabilities over time. This is a shift away from primarily ideological radicalization. Instead, it is more relationship-based recruitment, where control is established before ideology is introduced. This arrest highlights how the threat environment in Canada is evolving. Extremist networks like 764 are not confined to physical spaces, geographical locations, or structured organizations. They are operating online, targeting young, vulnerable individuals and using methods that are far more difficult to detect and disrupt. We're sticking with this story while we discuss the recent arrest in Quebec City that provides a clear example of the threat posed by the 764 network and the broader concern in what this group represents. According to the Canadian press, 764 is part of a growing category of online extremist networks that blur the line between terrorism, criminal exploitation, and psychological manipulation. Authorities describe 764 as a decentralized transnational network of nihilist violent extremists that operate almost entirely online. Unlike traditional terrorist groups, 764 does not appear to pursue a defined political objective. Instead, its activities are centered around glorifying violence, manipulating victims, encouraging acts of self-harm and abuse, seeking status and notoriety within online communities. Members often target young people or children through gaming platforms and social media, using tactics such as flattery, grooming, and eventual coercion to establish control. Canadian authorities formally identified 764 as a terrorist entity in December of 2025, recognizing that its activities meet the threshold of organized, ideologically motivated harm. What is particularly concerning is the scale. Experts monitoring the network suggest that there are multiple similar groups operating globally, often overlapping in membership and tactics. This reflects a broader trend. Extremist ecosystems are no longer tied to geography, leadership, or even single ideology. From an intelligence standpoint, this represents a significant evolution in the threat landscape. First, the lack of structure makes traditional counterterrorism approaches less effective. There is no leadership to disrupt, no central communications to intercept, and no clear organizational boundaries. Second, the blending of motivations, including status, control, and psychological gratification, complicates how these individuals are assessed and investigated. Third, this model creates a self-sustaining ecosystem, where victims may themselves turn into perpetrators, further expanding the network. The emergence of networks like 764 signals a shift towards more diffuse, digitally native form of extremism. From intelligence and law enforcement agencies, this is a complex and rapidly evolving challenge, one that requires new tools, new partnerships, and a deeper understanding of how online environments are shaping modern threats. If you or someone you know start to see signs of youth being manipulated by this group, contact the authorities. These signs include excessively more time online or on devices, further withdrawal from family regular activities or friends, unexplained harm to themselves, other young members of the family, or pets. Despite being a dispersed online group, 764 poses a real danger to younger people who are pulled into this dangerous ecosystem of nihilism, control, hate, and harm. We stay in Canada, but change from an online terrorist entity to a high-profile national security case that has taken an unexpected turn. The trial of former RCMP officer William Majcher, who was accused of acting on behalf of the Chinese government, was abruptly disrupted after the Crown unexpectedly closed its case. The development raises important questions about foreign interference investigation, evidentiary challenges, and Canada's ability to prosecute national security threats. Majcher has pleaded not guilty to a charge of committing preparatory acts under Canada's Security of Information Act. Prosecutors allege he was working to coerce a Canadian resident to return to China, allegedly for the benefit or direction of Chinese authorities. What makes this development significant is not just the allegations itself, but what happened in court. On the third day of the trial, the Crown unexpectedly closed its case without calling a witness, catching the defense off guard and forcing an adjournment. The case has been expected to hinge, at least in part, on testimony that would help contextualize communications and actions attributed to Majcher, particularly relating to the efforts to pressure an individual wanted by Chinese authorities to return to China. This abrupt shift fundamentally changes the posture of the trial and raises questions about the strength and structure of the Crown's case. The broader context here is critical. This case sits at the intersection of foreign interference, transnational repression, and unofficial repatriation efforts, issues that have become increasingly prominent in Canada over the past several years. Evidence presented in court has pointed to interactions between Canadian and Chinese authorities, including requests for assistance and attempts to locate individuals in Canada wanted by Chinese officials. This aligns with a pattern we've discussed before, where foreign states attempt to extend their reach to Canada to influence, intimidate, or compel individuals often outside formal legal frameworks. It's also worth noting that a prior court ruling found that Majcher's 2023 arrest was unconstitutional, citing a lack of reasonable grounds, a factor that may continue to shape how this case unfolds. From an intelligence perspective, this case highlights several ongoing challenges. First, proving foreign interference in a criminal court is inherently difficult. Much of the activity exists in areas such as communication, influence, facilitation, that do not always translate cleanly into criminal thresholds. Second, this reflects a pattern we've seen repeatedly. Foreign states leveraging intermediaries, diaspora connections, and informal pressure mechanisms rather than overt state action. And third, this case underscores the gap between intelligence awareness and prosecutorial success. Intelligence services may identify concerning activity, but translating that into admissible, actionable evidence is a far more complex process. The Majcher trial is more than just a single case. It's a window into how Canada is grappling with foreign interference and transnational pressure campaigns. The unexpected turn in court serves as a reminder that while the threat is real and persistent, the tools available to address it, particularly through the criminal justice system, remain limited and evolving. We finished this week discussing how CSIS is signaling that it may not be able to participate in the broader federal workforce reduction effort, citing ongoing operational demands. According to reporting from CBC News, the Canadian Security Intelligence Service has indicated it is likely unable to approve early retirement requests for its employees due to what it describes as sustained operational pressures. The issue stems from the federal government's push to reduce the size of the public service, including through early retirement incentives offered to tens of thousands of employees. However, CSIS appears to be an outlier. While other government departments may be able to reduce staffing through attrition and retirement, the intelligence service has indicated that its current workload and threat environment do not allow for the same flexibility. This is a significant signal. Intelligence agencies typically avoid public commentary on staffing constraints, so even indirect acknowledgement of operational strain suggests a high level of demand. The development comes at a time when the federal government is actively attempting to shrink the public service. Plans have been put in place to reduce staffing levels through a combination of attrition, retirements, and budget adjustments. At the same time, there has been strong uptake in early retirement programs across the federal workforce, with thousands of employees already applying. CSIS, however, operates under a fundamentally different set of pressures. Its mandate has expanded significantly in recent years, with increasing focus on foreign interference, cyber-enabled espionage, ideologically motivated violent extremism, and transnational repression. These are not static threats. They are growing, evolving, and increasingly resource-intensive. As I've discussed in previous podcast episodes, there is often a gap between the recognition of threats and the resourcing required to address them. This appears to be a clear example of that dynamic. If CSIS is unable to approve early retirements due to operational demands, it suggests workload is not decreasing, it's increasing, threat prioritization is becoming more complex, retaining experienced personnel is likely critical to ongoing operation. It also highlights a structural tension. While broader government is focused on cost reduction and workforce efficiency, intelligence and national security agencies are facing a rising demand environment that moves in the opposite direction. The indication that CSIS may be unable to approve early retirement is more than an internal staffing issue. It is a signal about the current threat landscape facing Canada. At a time when the government is looking to reduce its workforce, the country's intelligence service is effectively saying it cannot afford to do the same. That gap is worth paying closer attention to. Well, that's going to do it for this week. As always, the links to the articles from this podcast are in the transcript, and I highly recommend you check them out. This podcast is here to help inform you, not to form your opinion. I want to remind my listeners that the Pillar Society, an organization of former and retired intelligence professionals, is hosting a speaker series on May 26th at the Shankman Center in Orleans. The guest speaker for this event is Charles Burton, a former CSE officer who has written a book entitled The Beaver and the Dragon, which examines how Canada has struggled to effectively manage its relationship with China, and argues that Beijing has consistently leveraged diplomacy, influence, and pressure to advance its interests at Canada's expense. I'll leave the link in the show notes for tickets, and I hope to see you there. So until next week, stay curious, stay informed, and stay safe.
That wraps up this week's Global Intelligence Weekly Wrap-Up. Thank you for listening. From the growing use of compromised everyday devices by Chinese state-link hackers, to insider espionage within the Israeli Air Force, to the emergence of decentralized online extremist networks targeting youth here in Canada, This week's stories highlight a clear and evolving reality. National security threats are becoming more distributed, more covert, and increasingly embedded in the systems we rely on every day. Whether it's cyber actors leveraging global networks of consumer technology, foreign intelligence services recruiting individuals with access from within, or extremist groups operating entirely online through manipulation and coercion, the common thread is adaptation. These actors are not standing still. They are evolving faster, becoming more agile, and exploiting gaps in both technology and human behaviour. This week's episode also underscored how these challenges are playing out here at home. From the arrest linked to the 764 network and its targeting of vulnerable youth, to the Majcher trial and the complexities of prosecuting foreign interference, to signals from CSIS about sustained operational pressures, it is clear that Canada is not immune to these global trends. These are not isolated developments. They are part of a broader pattern of activity that spans cyber operations, human intelligence, online radicalization, and transnational influence. And increasingly, those lines are beginning to blur. Producing the Global Intelligence Weekly Wrap-Up requires continuous monitoring of international reporting, intelligence developments, and emerging threats to bring you clear, practical analysis each week. If you find value in this work, you're encouraged to support the podcast by visiting Buzzsprout, where you can make a one-time or ongoing contribution. Your support helps ensure that independent, informed intelligence analysis continues to be available to those who want to better understand the world around them. Don't forget to subscribe, share the episode, and leave a review. It helps more listeners discover the show. And as Neil always reminds us, stay curious, stay informed, and stay safe.